all these different systems are spokes on a wheel, like a bicycle wheel. Say something isn't working well, that spoke might be shorter than the other spokes in the wheel. You want to work on the inflammation. You want to work on the detoxification. You want to work on your gut health or whatever it is, right? You want to lengthen the spokes so all the spokes are the same length. That makes the wheel perfectly round. That's a smooth ride. Methylation is the center of that wheel. And if your methylation is flat, it doesn't matter if all those spokes are the same length, you're going to have a bumpy ride. Hey there, welcome to the Female Health Solution podcast, where we discuss women's health, hormones, and everything else in between. Join me as we dive into the tools that you need to live your healthiest life. All right, hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Female Health Solution podcast. I am your host, Dr. Beth Westy. Today, we're going to be talking about methylation and endometriosis. I'm going to be reading off some definitions of some of these things just because it's a lot to absorb and really understand some of these kind of fancy words and how they all fit together, but really it's about how your body functions. So when we talk about endometriosis, essentially that is the endometrial tissue within the uterus that migrates to other locations. So the tricky thing about this is that it's not just located in the uterus. It can go on the outside, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, your bladder, your digestive tract, your bowels. It can attach to internal muscle tissue, psoas. I had someone who had endometriosis surgery, and they removed endometrial tissue from her psoas muscle, which is hip flexor muscle. It goes other places, right? The trouble with it is it's really hard to identify exactly why. And there's a lot of research, which in my opinion is not enough research on this. But it's related to a lot of inflammation, excess estrogen or estrogen dominance, and the body not being able to process this. And it's also connected with a lot of other issues, that exist at the same time. So endometriosis and adenomyosis, PCOS, other issues with immune or autoimmune, right? Some people classify endometriosis as an autoimmune issue. Not that you have to, and not that everybody does, but it's important to recognize this connection. Now, what does that mean in terms of methylation? And a lot of people will focus on MTHFR, which is a genetic SNP that some people have, meaning you just don't methylate well. Methylation is a step in the process of detoxification of the body, which your body should do, right? I should detox. Yes, it should. But if you are too stressed, if you are nutrient deficient, if you do not have the right support system for your body, it gets overwhelmed with things, meaning too many toxins from other locations or things like that, your overall methylation and detoxification process is going to suffer. And genetics loads the gun, but your environment and lifestyle pulls the trigger. So this can be something that you might be thinking, gosh, I didn't have issues with this before. Why do I have issues with it now? Because you do. Because you do. Yes, that is sort of the thing. It doesn't always have to be. And there are a lot of things you can do lifestyle wise to help improve this, right? And MTHFR is just one genetic SNP. There are other genetic SNPs that do impact methylation overall, COMT, MTRR, things like that. But that's, looking at a genetic test, not to get too carried away on that per se, but to recognize that there are other things. Sorry, I am going through a lot of really detailed information because I want to pack a ton of content in here for you so that this is easy to understand and kind of make that connection that if you have a methylation issue, it can be part of the reason why you're suffering with increased endometriosis symptoms or issues around the same time. Why? Because methylation is an important step in processing your estrogen. So here's where I'm going to read some of this stuff just to give clarity on it. Methylation. And if you're Googling it and you're like, what's methylation? It's you add a methyl group on. Okay, like that doesn't tell anybody anything about it. So when we do genetic testing and talk about methylation, this is the description, which I really like. It's a biochemical process of making sure every cell is functioning optimally. Methylation is not just responsible for how we repair genetic material, but also how we make energy, respond to stress, handle inflammation, how well our cells detoxify, how our brain chemistry works, right? Methylation is the process involved in actually turning genes on or off. We may be able to reduce our risk of developing certain diseases and some types of cancers by optimizing methylation. That is one of the definitions of methylation as it pertains to your body's function, right? So the phrasing of genetics loads the gun, your environment or lifestyle pulls the trigger. The phrasing, again, this is not my phrasing, it's from someone else, or other people say this. Genetics loads the gun, methylation turns on or off the safety. The other way I think about it is like this. Imagine that all the systems in your body, all the chemical processes, all the things that occur in your system, right? Your digestive system, how your body reacts to inflammation, how your body detoxes, all of it. All these different systems are spokes on a wheel, like a bicycle wheel. Spokes, those are the spokes. Say you have a lot of inflammation, that spoke might be shorter, right? Say something isn't working well, that spoke might be shorter than the other spokes in the wheel. You want to work on the inflammation. You want to work on the detoxification. You want to work on your gut health or whatever it is, right? You want to lengthen the spokes. So all the spokes are the same length. That makes the wheel perfectly round. That's a smooth ride. Methylation is the center of that wheel. And if your methylation is flat, it doesn't matter if all those spokes are the same length, you're going to have a bumpy ride. So methylation is really, really, really important for overall function. When we talk about endometriosis specifically, how it is driven by excess estrogen and inflammation, what's the deal then with that excess estrogen, right? Endometriosis is known to be dependent on estrogen, excess estrogen, and everything. That means that the overproduction of estrogen by the body, it can change in estrogen metabolism. So that's how your body detoxes and processes estrogen out. It goes through 3 phases of metabolism. Most of your estrogen is processed by liver-gut pathways. Phase 1 and 2 are in liver. Phase 3 is the gut. So those are really important pathways. Are there other pathways? The water-soluble pathway, does that do some? Sure, but it's a smaller percentage. Most of it is the fat-soluble pathway, liver-gut. So that estrogen metabolism, excretion, and an imbalance then in that estrogen to progesterone ratio, which just drives more of that excess estrogen or estrogen dominance in your system. That adds to and increases that endometriosis issue, right? If you can keep your estrogen in check, it can keep your system from driving into that endometriosis. So when we talk about that estrogen dominance, that's what it is. Your body is supposed to produce and maintain the right amount of estrogen for you. Great. And as long as all those systems are functioning well, how you methylate, how you detox, how you process those estrogens out, wonderful. So some people think, gosh, maybe I'm just making too much estrogen. I mean, you can be, but your system is designed to also move it on out. If you're making too much, it should shunt it out fast too. And if it's not doing that, that's where we have to look at how well is your body processing out, metabolizing, right? That estrogen out. And that's where we see a lot of issues typically on a Dutch test or looking at your labs to say, okay, this is where your system is really having a hard time. But again, these things don't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. And there's other, cofactors that play into this. Meaning this can be an issue that you've been struggling with for a while. This can be something that, oh yeah, I had issues with my cycle when I was younger, and then I went maybe on a birth control to try and correct it, and I came off of it, and I had trouble with fertility, a lot of stress. I've had digestive issues. All these things add to it. Oh, also genetically, I'm not a good methylator. Yep, that adds to it, right? The tough thing about this is that every body is different. What you've experienced in life is different than someone else. So how it manifests in your body can be different. I have looked at labs. I've looked at Dutch tests for 2 gals that are sisters, grew up, they were a couple years apart, right? They were very close in age. They grew up in the same household. They were exposed to the same things generally, right? They didn't grow up on like opposite ends of the country or anything like that. They were raised the same, all the things, and they both had hormonal issues, but they were totally different. Why? Again, it can come back to several different factors of just overall how your body responds to stress, your own individual microbiome in your digestive system, your genetics. Even though you're sisters, it can be a different genetic. And that's really frustrating to deal with. So when we look at that and we look at the connection of endometriosis and methylation, right? That methylation issue can increase and can, I don't want to say trigger, but it doesn't help. If you're not a good methylator, it doesn't help the endometriosis. You have to work on the methylation as well, right? Because that's the process of flushing out or processing estrogen correctly so that estrogen stops driving more endometriosis issues. And when people say, oh, can you get rid of it forever? And there are some people who they change so much with their diet and lifestyle that they see a huge improvement. But it's one of those things. And it's very similar with like PCOS. I had somebody ask me like, oh, did you cure your PCOS? And I'm like, that's not really the phrasing that you can say. I mean, I had cysts for over a year and a half every month, and it was awful. But since I worked on my hormones and did that time frame to get rid of them, I haven't had a cyst since. I have not had a cyst that has grown and burst like it did before. Does that mean I'm cured? Some people might say that. I don't know that I would phrase it that way, because I know if I let my body get really stressed and did not take care of myself and did not manage my own process of, because I found out through genetic testing, I am not a good detoxifier. I am not a good methylator personally. So that was a big piece of it for me. Like when I look back at that time in my life, stress was the biggest thing that set it off. And methylation is highly connected to that stress. So if I get really stressed out and don't support my system, I am at risk for having those come back for sure. And it's the same thing with a lot of these other hormonally driven issues, right? Endometriosis, adenomyosis, PCOS. There's a reason why this is happening in your system. It's not happening for no reason. There's a reason why it's happening in your system. And you're not crazy for feeling like you are lost or stuck or frustrated or whatever. So diving into what your hormones are doing right now, how to process them out better, again, specifically through that liver-gut pathway, which we see on the Dutch test, exactly how to do that. And then also giving your body the right amount of time. The biggest mistake I see women make with working with their body is just not allowing it the time. Not really realizing that this is something your system has been working towards and building up for a decade or more. And then expecting it to turn around in a month or two. Nope. A lot of times it can take 6 months. It can take a year, which sounds like a long time. But because of the way our hormonal cycle works, it's just the nature of it. But when you give your system enough time, it is incredible to see things shift and change in such a positive way from allowing your body to function better. So that's what I got for you guys today. That's the connection between methylation and endometriosis. And I talked a little bit about, adenomyosis, PCOS in there too. But I do hope that this is helpful when we talk about the correlation, right, of estrogen, how excess estrogen, how it's not being processed out, can manifest as endometriosis. Right. And again, there's other issues there too. Typically, it's usually not just one thing. There's usually other inflammatory or other things we have to target as well. But that's why it's so helpful to dive in and look specifically at what you would need and then take steps from there. So that's what I got for you guys today. Thank you for tuning in. Let me know if you have questions. Let me know if you want me to do more of a detailed scientific deep dive on this. I can, but I do just try to explain it in a way that kind of makes sense. That methylation, if you're not a good methylator, it can drive more of that excess estrogen, and that excess estrogen then can manifest into those endometriosis issues, right? Excess estrogen can also be other things as well. And then with the endometriosis, you can also have the inflammation or other autoimmune issues or things tied in with that. So fun. But all right. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys, and I will see you later. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. If you would like more information, just head on over to drbethwesty.com for all the show notes and information from today's episode. And if you're looking for more community, more support, you can find and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and I would love to see you there.